So welcome to another edition of Ipswich Town Profiles, a series where we put a spotlight on former town players and look back at their time at Portman Road, from joining the club to their key moments in a blue shirt. And we've got a different setup this time. We did Sylvan Linskwinski last time, but today I'm joined by good old Dan as we put the spotlight on Bontcho Guentchev, the Bulgarian international. Dan, thanks for joining me. We're going to go down memory lane to talk about Bontcho. Before we get into everything he did at town, when you hear his name, when you see pictures of him, what do you think of?
First of all, the first thing I think of is the song. There's a famous song about him. I think it's Two Limits, which we can go into later. But he had a very memorable song, and I think he had a memorable song because he was a bit of a cult hero. That's what I always think about Bontcho, was he became a cult hero quite quickly for various reasons we'll talk about. But yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting about him. It was a good time in our kind of Ipswich history at the time as well. So yeah, and he was a decent player.
Yeah, people use cult heroes, fan favourites a lot, but he's definitely one who, if I ever talk to any town fans and Bontcho gets mentioned, I love Bontcho, just because even though he was only at the club for a little while, he's just always a player that everyone remembers. Let's talk about him joining the club first of all then, Dan. It was the new Premier League. The season was already underway. He signed in December 1992 from Sporting Lisbon, when we signed players from international teams and, coming from Portugal. But what was your memories of hearing that we're going to be signing Bontcho Guentchev? Of course, we didn't have podcasts, didn't have videos back then. It was all on the newspapers or whatever on the next day.
Yeah, it was all talking to people in real life. Well, the thing was that obviously it was a great time at the club. We'd just got promotion to the Premier League, and we were in the top flight, and everything was a bit amplified a bit more. Everything a bit bigger. There was more attention, obviously, on the TV, and I think we were doing really well as well. We were unbeaten at home in the league that season. We'd started off really well. We're taking it by storm, and the fact was we were buying a international footballer from Sporting Lisbon, I think, for £250,000, and that wasn't Ipswich. Didn't really do that kind of stuff, That wasn't really us. So, the name, it sounded quite exotic. It sounded that it was, this is kind of like a big signing for us. So it was very exciting at the time, and the club at the time had a lot of momentum. We had it was interesting, and when you look back at how we got him, I mean, it was thanks to Sir Bobby Robson. So the story behind him was that Bontcho had started off from Bulgaria and had moved to, he'd just broken into the Bulgarian national team and got a move to Sporting Lisbon. So Bobby Robson at the time was managing in Holland. He'd won the title twice, back to back, for PSV. He'd fallen out with the Dutch board, and had ended up at Sporting Lisbon in that summer. And funnily enough, he was his interpreter at the time was Jose Mourinho. And I remember, in retrospect, Bobby Robson said that he spent a year at Sporting Lisbon, and he said the club was an absolute shambles, and the president was a loose cannon. And Bobby Robson joined them in July, and only a month later, I think Bontcho came to us on trial. If I'm right, he'd spent a bit of time at the club before, so Bobby had gone there, had looked at the squad, and had sent Bontcho over to Ipswich. That's obviously how we got him, that contact, and had recommended him to come to Ipswich. So, that's where we got him from. The reason why he was a cult hero was his impact. The way he started at the club was he had an amazing impact straight away, and he was a slightly different kind of player to what we had as well. And if we can go into it, but of course we were unbeaten at home, and I think it was between Christmas and New Year we played Blackburn Rovers, who had been promoted with us. with Jack Walker's Millions. Kenny Dalglish was manager, and it was 0-0 with it was a rocking Portman Road. 25 minutes to go, it was 0-0, and Roy Wegerle scored for Blackburn. I remember it, 20-yard daisy cutter to put them 1-0 up. And it was, maybe this, is this the balloon being burst? Is this the end of the run? And then this kind of diminutive, slight built, no pace striker, attacking midfielder scored a wonderful equaliser in front of the Churchmans. It was, I think it will be on YouTube. It was in front of the Churchmans. It was a really lovely overhead kick. He equalised, and I think about the 79th minute. The ball is creeping towards the corner. It takes a slight divot off the pitch and goes inside the post. And it was just bang. He was here. Here's our new signing for $250,000. Great time to be an Ipswich fan, and Bontcho had come on the scene. And that we had this new cult hero, we'd had a new addition to the squad. And then I think probably 3 games later than that, maybe, we went to Spurs. Obviously, they're not what they are now, but they were a big Premier League team at the time, and had Teddy Sheringham up front and Anderton and Barnby, and we won 2-0 at Spurs. Memorable for Frank Yallop scoring an unbelievable goal from about 25 yards right in front of the Ipswich fans. We were behind the goal in the corner, and then again, 79th minute. I always remember that. He always seemed to score in the 79th minute. 79th minute, we were 1-0 up. Neil Thompson bombed down the left, pulled it back, and who was there? Bontcho Guentchev. And I mean, that was it. His reputation was almost cemented. I always remember as well with him, he didn't really know how to celebrate scoring, which was always quite funny. He seemed to kind of score these massive goals. The crowd were going absolutely potty, lost in the moment. And Bontcho used to kind of wander over to the fans. You'll see this for both his goals, and kind of sit with them. He just walked up to them and was like, he didn't have a celebration. He just used to give the first person he saw a hug. He did that at home to Blackburn, and he did that at White Hart Lane. And like a kind of a star was born with those 2 early goals in the league.
Yeah, and in the Premier League, he's playing, top flight of English football, and he's not celebrating like mad, like some players do. Like Chris Cromwell had a dance, everyone else celebrated the way they did. But yeah, to score that overhead kick, I've watched it back. I wasn't alive when he scored that goal because sadly I'm a young boy. But I've looked back, and that is a very interesting overhead kick. To do that, even just attempt it sometimes. When you see players attempt it, you go, they're going to pull it off, and he did pull it off very good indeed. And as you said, you mentioned the goal against Spurs. I want to talk quickly about the other player that signed with him. Vladio Bozanowski. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce people's names. You know me, everybody. But he also signed. We've got a great picture of him, what's going to appear right now. And he signed alongside him. He joined from another Portuguese side. He didn't, of course, go on to do the same things as Bontcho did. I think he played like 12 appearances. But what can you remember of that sort of signing as well?
I vaguely remember him, but he was a pretty nondescript defensive midfielder who made fleeting appearances while Bontcho was just like hit the ground running. And then, of course, that was obviously a season of 2 halves, because not long after that Tottenham game, our league form started to evaporate pretty quickly, but we went on a rather strong FA Cup run, which Guentchev did fantastically well in as well.
He did, yeah. I've got the stats here of the FA Cup. He scored against Tranmere at Prenton Park in the FA Cup 4th round. We won 2-1. Then he scored a nice hat-trick against Grimsby Town, which is always good to get a hat-trick in the 5th round. 4-0 win at Portman Road. We got knocked out in the quarterfinals that year against Arsenal. We lost 4-2 at Portman Road, but then Arsenal went on to win it that year. But for him to score in that game as well, that must have been a great just for us having a cup run in the FA Cup, when we won it in 1978. So his scoring goal was against anybody, really, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, the FA Cup then, I think it's fair to say, was probably, it's sad now the way the FA Cup's become a little bit, because back then it was a big deal. I mean, and if you think again, the season before when we had won championship, let's call it a championship, as champions, we had gone on a really good FA Cup run in that season. And we obviously got knocked out by Liverpool. So we were taking the FA Cup seriously, you know, and we were a scout then, being a Premier League team. And I remember, he scored at Tranmere, and then he scored the hat-trick against Grimsby, and I remember like 20,000. You know, you wouldn't get that now for an FA Cup game, fourth round, and we probably would, but you know what I mean? It was like Portman Road was getting busy for the FA Cup, and he scored a hat-trick. Johnny Wart scored, and I remember it being against Grimsby, because Grimsby were the team we drew 0-0 with the season before, when we could have clinched promotion, and we famously didn't turn up. So I think we took out our frustration on Grimsby in the FA Cup, battered them 4-0. Guentchev was just like fantastic, scored a fantastic hat-trick. And yeah, then played Arsenal in the quarterfinals, which was he scored. I can't remember who scored the other one, but that was an interesting day. It was like FA Cup quarterfinal, Saturday, 3:00 at your home ground. Arsenal brought a lot. I remember them having a lot. I remember them bringing a lot without tickets. It was quite an interesting day. There were Arsenal dotted all over the stadium and all around the town. But great times, and Bontcho scored in that. But unfortunately, we lost 4-2, which kind of coincided with a bit of a dip in the league form. And I think, you know, essentially that was probably the high point of Bontcho's Ipswich career at the beginning of his spell, because we stayed up that season, but next season, the second season of his 3 seasons, was much more difficult. Clubs had sussed us out. We weren't the new kids on the block, and we weren't getting anywhere near any respect whatsoever because of what we had done. So Mick McGivern was in charge, or I think John Lyle, had moved upstairs, or he kind of handed over the reins a bit to Mick. And obviously what was happening then was, because teams had sussed us out, we adapted slightly. We just basically became very, very defensive. The team was getting a bit older, and we were really battling for points much more. And it was, the football then was much more blood and thunder, put it that way. That wasn't Bontcho's style. He was not a typical English footballer. He was not blood and thunder. He was all craft and guile, and would play wide. He would drop wide. He would find pockets of space. He would, you know, he created goals and chances. He wasn't prolific. He was more kind of attacking midfielder, but could pull out wide, and probably would have benefited from you know, a more kind of robust striker up there with him, or a certain different kind of striker, you know. So we were under Mick McGivern. The football wasn't great. The crowd were beginning to turn. We were just clinging on really for our Premier League status, which we did in 93, 94. But what was interesting was, of course, then was, I think, another big reason why he was such a hero, which is what happened in the summer at the end of that season, where Bulgaria had qualified for the World Cup. England hadn't qualified for the World Cup, thanks to Graham Taylor, which I went to too many of those games. I'm not going to resurface all those memories of us not qualifying. Anyway, it was in America, and Bulgaria had made it. And it's fair to say that Bulgaria shocked a lot of pundits, that they got to the World Cup semi-finals. You know, Bontcho, an Ipswich player, was playing in the World Cup, which I think is always fun, and was doing well in the World Cup. And as Bulgaria progressed, you know, I think they beat Germany, maybe, I think, in the quarterfinals, and then lost Italy 2-1 in the semi-finals. There was an Ipswich player playing in the World Cup semi-final, and we were in the Premier League, and this was quite cool. And I remember there was a balding midfielder for Bulgaria called Jordan Lechkov, who scored quite a few important goals. And the same song for Lechkov was the same song as Guentchev, Jordan, Lechkov. And it was this song was just going round everywhere all the time. anyway, he came back from the World Cup. And that unfortunately that just season, I think the season we got relegated. I think it was 94, 95, if I remember. Yeah, the football was dire. We were dire. I think that was a season we got humped 9-0 from Man U, and Bontcho wasn't getting much of a look in then at all. He was a star that shone very, very brightly and flared brightly, and I think a lot of it. But he was a good player. He was a good player, and I think, to be honest, he'd be an even better player in a certain type of team. And then off he left to go to Luton. Where he spent 3 years, and I've spoken to a couple of Luton fans about him, and it was exactly the same with him at Luton. It's probably even more blood and thunder, being a couple of divisions down, but he scored some beautiful free kicks and some amazing assists, and that was the man Bontcho Guentchev. Good player.
Yeah, that covers all bases. I had a few other notes to add, but Dan's covered it all. But that is fantastic, Dan. And of course, we haven't spoken much about his mullet. He had a bit of a mullet as well. Ian Marshall had the mullet, but Bontcho brought it as well, and he wore it well as well.
Yeah, well, I'm not one to talk about bad hair, thanks to my Jason DeVos look, but he had a proper Eastern European barnet. It was like this mullet, which he kind of used to gel up, and he kind of looked, vampiric, this kind of Eastern European, it was kind of like we hadn't really had a player like that. It was obviously the influx of kind of footballers coming to the Premier League. We were in that area. I mean, the other things I remember, I worked in West London in a place called Barron's Court, and one day I was walking around on lunch, and there was a bar/cafe in West Kensington on Castle Down Road called Strikers, and it was Bontcho Guentchev had opened up a bar/cafe in around 2002. So this was after his career had finished, and he had a bar cafe in West London, so which was slightly surreal. I think it probably lasted as long as his Ipswich career. I think it was 3 years, and it went pop. But clearly, when you look at it, he was someone that, even though after Ipswich and Luton, he went back to Bulgaria. He went back to CSK Sofia, back to his homeland. He came back to England again, so he must have had a soft spot. He probably had his kids here. I think his son played for Lowestoft, and Lubomir, I think his son was, and he'd obviously settled here, and a bit like maybe Sergei Baltachar, you come to it, you start a family, you get good memories, and back he was playing non-league football and running bars. So, but I think it was definitely a cult hero, and that song, it takes me back to the summer of 1994.
Do it, you got to do it, Dan. You got to sing it.
I've got to do it again. Yeah, was it Bontcho, 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 Guentchev. You still hear it. That tune is still sung at grounds today, just obviously for different players. So, good player, good times at Ipswich they were, apart from the relegation.
Yeah, obviously. But there we go. Great memories from Dan on Bontcho Guentchev. Get in the comments down below your thoughts, your memories of good old Bontcho. And there we go. We're back for many more of these Ipswich Town profiles coming soon with other different players. Stay tuned. Let us know which players you'd like us to cover. Dan, thanks again for joining me.
No worries, Ross. Cheers, mate.